Rachel, let us know when you're good.
Okay, we look good. I'm just gonna do the Zoom recording too. Okay.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Rachel. Welcome in, everyone. Welcome to the PCEF committee meeting, March 11th, 2026, from 6 to 7. It is 6:03, and we're going to get started this evening. But before we get started, I want to acknowledge for everyone joining us that we will not be discussing recent coverage regarding the possible use of PCEF funds for Moda Center renovations at tonight's meeting. Although the legislature acted last week to approve state funding for the Moda Center, there is not enough information yet for a productive committee discussion. As more details become available, staff will provide an update on a process for engaging both the committee and the public on the conversation. For tonight, we will remain focused on the business at hand included on today's agenda. So I would love to move to the next slide, please. So here's our virtual meeting participation checklist. Committee meetings are open to the public, and the public is invited to comment around 6:05, so we will have public comment this evening. Guidelines for public participation: the chat box is open for introductions and for noting public comment interest. All other times, host-only chats, and that means PCEF staff. Raise your hand will be used by the committee and presenters only. Video on for committee members and presenters only. Microphone, public members are muted. This meeting is being recorded and captioning is available for using subtitles, please. Next slide, please. So our agenda today, welcome and introductions. We're going to do public comment. We have everyone here, so I believe we will be approving November, December, and February minutes as an action item. We will have program updates, 2026 community grants overview, committee recruitment update, and we'll close around 7. That is our goal for this evening. Next slide, please. I would love for us to have introductions. So I would love to introduce myself, Christine Moses. I'm your facilitator. I'd like to hand it to Tracy Scott, who is our co-chair. And then Tracy, if you could kick it off to another committee member, that will be great. We'll go and we'll popcorn over to the next person, and then I'll have Sam introduce staff.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Moses, and good evening, everyone. I'm Tracy Scott, and I am the co-chair of the PCEF committee. I am going to send it over to Andre.
Good evening, everyone. Andre Lightsey Walker, he, him pronouns. I'm the transportation carbon reduction representative for PCEF. Super happy to be here, and I will pass it over to Megan.
Hi, good evening, all. Megan, or Meg, horse, she, her, and I'm a committee member, also representing the regenerative ag and green infrastructure side of things. I'll pass it to D'Angelo.
Good evening, everybody. D'Angelo Moaning. Hope this daylight savings transition is treating everybody well. Happy to see you here. I serve as the co-chair of the PCEF committee, representing the contractor perspective. Super excited for this evening, and I'll pass it over to Anna.
Good evening, everybody. Anna Allen, she, her pronouns, and I'm a committee member. Just as an FYI, I have my daughter home, and so might have to go off camera in a few minutes just to make sure she has dinner and is fed and happy and paying attention to something else while I participate here in this space. Appreciate the time and being here. And I'm not sure, I'm also on my phone, my computer is acting up. And so I'm not sure if there's other committee members that I'm not seeing.
We're going to toss it over to Robin. Thank you so much, Anna.
Good evening or good afternoon for those of you still on the old time. Robin Wang, community member, he, him. And I think that's it, right?
Yep, sure is.
Okay.
So Sam, welcome in.
Good evening, everyone. Sam Brasso, he, him, program manager of the PCEF team. And I'll send it to Rachel, who's supporting us here this evening.
Hi, all. Rachel Gilmore, she, her pronouns, program analyst on the PCEF team. And I'll send it over to James.
James Valdez, he, him, member of the PCEF team here. Good to be with you all.
Beautiful, thank you. Anyone else?
Last but not least, Rafael.
Raphael, thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Rafael Timarchi, I use he, him pronouns. I'm the external affairs manager for PCEF.
Thank you so very much, everyone. Welcome in. Next slide, please. As we do, we just want to take a minute or so and center ourselves. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes or gaze softly down. I invite you to place your feet firmly planted on the floor. And place the palms of your hands on your thighs. This is a very strong position. You're supported under your legs, you're supported on your back. Your hands are on your thighs. It's a very strong, supported position. And if you have a stressful day, all you have to do is close your eyes and breathe in and out purposefully 3 times. So I invite you to do that at your own pace. And I invite you to open your eyes slowly. Take a big stretch up. Yes. Oh, beautiful. Coming into our body, giving our mind a little bit of rest in between so we can be focused on our conversation today. So thank you so much for doing that with me. Next slide, please. Public comment. Please indicate your interest in providing public comment by raising your hand or indicate your interest through the Zoom chat function. For those joining the meeting by phone, please enter *9 on your phone to indicate your interest in providing public comment. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Do we have any people who would like to make a public comment? I see, D'Angelo, you raised your hand, but I do not see any community members.
Sorry, I did that on total accident, but I would like to open with comments if there is no public comment.
I do not see any others. So D'Angelo, go right ahead.
Thank you. Well, one, I just wanted to open and just say, I'm incredibly excited and happy for everyone to be here. I feel very inspired. I was able to attend the State of Black Business Forum in Oregon, hosted by the Metro Chamber, NAMAC Oregon, and the BBAO. And I was thrilled to see Tracy there. I'm always having a good time seeing Tracy, but it was very inspiring to see our Black businesses talk about the state of our economy, the community stability, cultural viability, and equitable access, and how to really resolve and come to real amenable solutions for our communities. Similarly, I was able to attend the community grants kickoff, and really seeing community members come together to really I guess, come together and talk about what it is that they'd like to see, the funding opportunities available, and really provide a space for solidarity for folks to really achieve the things that they want to achieve through through this process. So I was just really inspired again by that previous event and the community grants kickoff. I was really excited to see our community there, and I'm really excited to see what proposals come out of that.
Thank you so much. All right, well, we will go ahead and move forward. Since we do not have any public comment, I would love to turn this over to Sam for program updates.
Okay. So we're going to run through this, and D'Angelo, I appreciate just your reflection on the state of Black Oregon convening, but also the community grants kickoff, since that'll be the primary topic today. So first, I just wanted to give you all a quick update on the CIP amendment that's been working, the Climate Investment Plan amendment that's been making its way and working through council after a range of amendments and discussions and second readings. Today, the council did adopt or did approve in the second reading the Climate Investment Plan amendment. There were some changes though, and there were some requests to come back, and so we're going to bring those discussions and have some of that conversation with you all, or share sort of how that's coming to light. One of the conversation pieces and amendments that ultimately played out last week was reverting back to the original Strategic Program 14, focused on fair and flexible capital. So that will be a conversation point we expect to bring back later this year when we re-review programs, where programs are in terms of their spending and where they're moving. And so that I expect that to be a topic of conversation later this year in the CIP amendment process. And then the other that came up today that, while it's certainly discussions we've had, revolved around how we've essentially made adjustments to our workforce and contractor equity approaches in response to the mayor's executive order and bringing in alignment within the city. So there's a lot of discussion about that today and questions about that. We're going to be working it's probably brought a renewed energy and attention on that effort, and we will be working to bring something back to council and ultimately share that back with you all around some additional language that the city council can consider in that space. So that's we'll be working with the city attorney's office, procurement, and certainly bring those conversations back to you all to see how those play out. But just want to acknowledge that was a core topic of debate today. That while we briefed folks in our January meetings and whatnot at council, it was one of the topics that surfaced up today and took up a good bit of time. So just want to name, so it got passed, but we will be coming back to council in about 45 days or so to talk about our approach to workforce and contractor equity and how we're thinking about that as we move forward. I'm not going to spend too much time on this next item. It's just to say, for folks that are just chiming in this moment, our community grant solicitation is about to kick off. And we'll talk more about that in the next little bit. But what I really lined it up here because that will be kicking off at the end of this month. We're expecting it should get released. March 25th is our date that we're aiming for, maybe the 26th. So we're aiming to release it. It'll be out for 60 days. And then a couple weeks later, we will release our capacity building cohort. So this was a core part of the climate investment plan and really carving out and creating a space for building capacity for organizations that are central, that are doing climate work, but that just need to shore up some of their internal organizational backbone infrastructure. And so that capacity building cohort application, and it's the solicitation for that will open a couple weeks later. So it will run parallel to the community grants application. And we're aiming to ultimately bring about 8 to 10 organizations into a 3-year cohort where we support them with operating expenses and ultimately bring them to a cohort where we're building up the organization. And so really excited as we get that going to bring that and actually give you all an update as one of our most recent staff members, Sheila Elliott, has been working on that, and we're excited about that work. Next up is just the fair and flexible capital. I wanted to just relay this one because this is one that I know several folks, and I believe, Robin, you've been engaged on some of this, but we've been working with a contractor to essentially do a market assessment for consumer financing products so that ultimately can help define the RFP that we release later this year. And so that market assessment is coming to a close here. We're just doing a final review on the report. providing some comments and some suggestions, and expect to publish that assessment next month, ultimately in advance of an RFP solicitation later this summer for administrators for our consumer financing product to support energy efficiency upgrades. And then moving on from there, our just want to say this has been a long time coming. Our strategic program 2 was a key program. It's a $50 million program focused on unregulated multifamily housing and investing in clean energy improvements in that space. It's always been a hard nut to crack, and we're getting to the final stages of executing our contract with a range of partners there to support that program. The primary contractor being TRC companies, and so. Hopefully, as that gets going, that program will get into program development and early launch here later this fall. Second to last here is just our update on our climate-friendly schools programming. This is just a little bit more fun element where we're going to be hosting an event in partnership with Portland Public Schools at OMSI on April 23rd to celebrate some of the student-led projects from the prior year. So that's just a moment to celebrate, acknowledge a lot of the kudos and the work that happened a lot as part of the student-led initiatives, which, if you all, just as a reminder, is an annual funding that we provide to all middle and high schools across the city, within the city of Portland boundaries, to support student-led efforts at addressing climate change. And then I'll just name the last one, and I know there may be other questions, but I'll just acknowledge that is that we're fortunately our regenerative ag baseline assessment, actually, that I know I'll say in this context, Professor Meg Horst has been working on with Portland State University students over the past year, and some change that we're getting close to sharing that in the next few weeks here. And I know that's just been an extensive effort of doing work with our regenerative ag community and understanding the land base and the opportunities to do regenerative ag within the city. And so that assessment will be coming out here, and that's just been really a key product in helping define some of our North Star within the regenerative ag space.
Thank you, Sam.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Robin.
Yeah, appreciate it. For the OMSI student event, can you share an invite on that, or details?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I will double check and confirm that we can do that for sure, just to make sure that it's not just. But yes, Robin, assuming so, when I get the confirmation with staff, I'll make sure that the team here knows. And we've got actually. It's an interesting moment. We've got several other events, and we're happy to let you all know. We know Bird Alliance, for instance, has been making good progress on their site restoration on 82nd Avenue and has been hosting a range of community planting events, including actually one tomorrow with McDaniel students. So we've got a range of events as we get into especially in the regenerative ag, the green infrastructure space that are taking place this fall. And so we'll start with letting you know about the student opportunities, but we know that we've just got a range of other planting events. And if you all would like to know, we're happy to start kind of cluing in which ones may be good opportunities for you all to show up to.
Beautiful. Any other questions? All right. Sam, we'll go ahead and move on. But what we didn't do was the minutes. We didn't have a slide for the minutes. So I'm suggesting that we go ahead and do the minutes. So I would love for a motion to approve the 11/12/25, 12/10/25, and 2/11/26 meeting minutes. May I have a motion?
Dr. Moses, I move that we approve the 3 that you have noted.
Thank you, Tracy. I have a motion. May I have a second?
Anna seconds.
Thank you. Any conversation, discussion, or changes? Seeing none, I would love for us to vote. May I have all in favor? Please raise your hand. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Our minutes are passed. So now we can go on to the 2026 Community Grants Overview.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Moses, and apologies. We should have had that slide deck. So
That's
in this
okay.
next bit, this is really a moment to take stock of where we are on community grants. We're going to give you sort of just an overview of where we are on community grants in the context of the climate investment plan. So you sort of see, because community grants are the piece that it's always been part of defining that within the climate investment plan was creating those clear allocations for those annual rounds. So we're going to talk about where we are within the broader climate investment plan and how many community grant rounds we've got here. And mainly it's to situate you all on, we've been at this now for some time, believe it or not. And so what we'll talk about is just what happened in the last round, 2025 grants, the 2026 grants, and then really start to look ahead. And part of that is just to start staging the questions that we're thinking through, some of the evaluation efforts that we're going to be going through on the staff side in order to, as we get into the next CIP development starting in early 2027, we're going to have a better framework for how we think about further integrating or thinking about the role of community grants vis-a-vis strategic programs, vis-a-vis how they relate to our community and the growing capacity there. So this is largely just a primer to get you all a sense of where we're sitting today so that we can start looking towards the rest of the year and ultimately the climate investment plan and start to get just some of your initial desires out there in terms of how you'd like to be engaged. And one part I guess I will acknowledge I'm really excited to share here is that I'm sharing this presentation with you all today, namely because it's topical, timely. We're going to be releasing our community grants solicitation here at the end of the month. But next time you hear about this, you will be hearing on this from June Reyes, who many of you all know is a former staff member of ours that is going to be rejoining our team as our grant making and capacity building program manager. So you'll get to hear from her when she comes in, and she'll be starting up tomorrow. So I'm starting to hear today, but we'll acknowledge that this will not be me next time talking about this. Okay. All right. So first, this is a broad timeline. Because there's a lot of content here, I'm gonna just slowly describe what's going on here so you visually get a sense for where we are. First, what we've got here is really, as you look across the bottom, we've got our climate investment plan when it was adopted, right before 2024, the amendment to add the city projects in 25. We're now here at this spot here, right at the early part of 2026. And then you've got sort of further out on the bottom here, just setting the stage for when the next climate investment plan is effective. As part of this climate investment plan, we've already run 2 community grant solicitations, one that opened up in late 2023. It ultimately got awarded funding in late 2024, in fall of 2024. Our next round opened up in early 2025, awarded funding late 2025, around November. That's just this last round. We've just now started to get our first grant agreements from that round out the door. So we're really excited about that. And that just gives you a timeline of how this starts to flow out. And we're on the precipice of getting our next round out. So in this current climate investment plan, we have this round we're going to get out here later this month, and we've got a round in 2027 and then 2028. And I just marked here and those are those 2 red stars. So you have a sense for what's to come. And there's this blue star, that would be the next climate investment plan, which would really be teed up as part, but that would be the next community grant round, which would be part of the next climate investment plan, since the funding wouldn't come live until the next plan. Now, within that window, part of why we're having this conversation today is starting early 2027, we'll begin the development process for the next CIP. And so it's just important that we're starting to take stock of where we've been, where we're at, so that we can start thinking about that, asking the right questions, doing the focus groups, the roundtables, asking our community members where we need to step back. And while within this climate investment plan, we're coming up to our 3rd community grant solicitation. We did 2 before. So this really is our 5th community grant solicitation we're approaching here. So we're at that right point to really just, again, take stock, because as Meg knows this, as Robin knows this, our original committee members, the original committee body was the ones that you all came in and designed the community grant solicitation. In each round, we've made adjustments, but that kind of formally went its way towards staff running those processes with the 2022 code changes. And so now we're just bringing this back so that you all get a sense for where we're at, because you'll have to take action on reauthorizing our community grants in the next CIP process. And so just before I move on, any just broad high-level questions here about the process, and then I can take us on to talking about last year's round, next year's round, and some of the changes that have taken place over time. Okay. So just to, again, another way of just taking stock, we had our very first round pre-CIP in April 2021. This is our beta round. It's where we designed our core underlying framework. We awarded 45 projects, primarily planning grants, if I recall right, about 29 planning grants at a tune of 8.6 million, 29 planning grants, 16 implementation grants. In July of 2022, that was our next round. We did a larger sum, and that's when we just started seeing our funding substantially increasing and wanted to take advantage of that opportunity before we took a major pause, did our, retooled the program, and then ultimately developed our climate investment plan, and then came out with our awards in September of 2024 for our third round, and that was the first of the climate investment plan. That was awarded to about 71 projects, 92 million. We had our last round, and that was awarded just last year, November 2025, 64 million, and now we're approaching opening up our next round. That last round was about 60 projects, as I named. There's about 51 implementation grants, 9 planning grants. Total funds awarded were about 64.4 million. Average or total metric tons reduced projected out of that portfolio of projects was at about 76,200. And this just gives you a sense of the different award averages, average sizes for the different portfolios. So workforce and contract, our largest being our energy efficiency renewable energy portfolio, where the average award size was about 2.5 million. Followed by our transportation decarbonization portfolio, where the average award was about 800,000, followed by workforce contractor development, 750,000, regenerative ag green infrastructure, about 525,000, and then our other catch-all category, which is average size was about 343,000. So that speaks to the average size of our implementation projects within that round. And what I can say here is, at this point, coming from where we were when we first developed the program, as you see here, this is just a little diagram we had here as part of the package that ultimately we shared with city leadership as we move forward with this package. But we have a much better understanding of what it takes to administer this program, what we've done, what we've tweaked in terms of having a clear eligibility screening, technical review, financial review, applicant vetting, scoring panels, financial and then the final recommendation. I share all this to say we have as we move into this next set of conversations and we start teasing out how do we want to revise, update, shift the program, we've just got a lot more understanding. We have from where we started once upon a time now, we have a full understanding of the different implications of making these adjustments, and we feel like we're going to be in a good place to take that evaluative perspective and tease out how we make these adjustments to respond to the feedback we've heard over time. Okay. And now I'm going to just quick highlight of just the 2026 community grants application overview. A lot of this is not going to be new information, but I'll share this nonetheless, and then we'll move into some of the key changes we've had over time, and then really just lay out some of the discussion questions for you all, and prime you all for that. So community grants, again, we have really 2 different sort of key types of grants you can apply for. You can apply for a planning grant or an implementation grant. And one of the key changes in our planning grants is we now allow for up to 2 years for planning grants, because some certainly can take up to a year. When we started the program, it was 1 year. We just realized we saw that many organizations needed, in some instances, 2 years. They've got it directly, obviously, tied to our funding areas, and then we can fund things like assessments, planning, engagement, curriculum development, and so forth. It tends to be, I would acknowledge our planning grants, and this has always been a tension point, and just to acknowledge it outright. Our planning grants there's a lot of value and they're high value. We tend to award anywhere from 8 to 12 per year. And they tend to have the most demand for them. The ratio, it tends to be about, we do 1 award for a planning grant for every 8 applications or so. So it tends to have a lot, the award ratio tends to be lower here. And I think the discussion point, certainly I suspect will come up and we'll tease through is there different avenues to do planning at different levels? Because planning grants, we say this oftentimes, they take a significant amount of work for our staff to administer, as does in some instances a $2 million grant. And so in terms of just being efficient with resources, planning grants are key. We know they're key, but there's a trade-off in terms of our ability to move resources with the given staff that we have. So that's always the balance point. And then we've got our implementation grants. And so these are our projects that that are doing direct implementation work. For the most part, when we're talking about most of our funding categories, they have to reduce emissions and support community benefits and equity benefits. But That isn't always the case. There isn't always explicit emissions reductions expectations with things like workforce development or contractor technical assistance. So those are the spaces, but for nearly all the other implementation grants, there's that clear expectation. And for those, you can apply for funding for up to 5-year timeline with certain limitations and restrictions. And part of where, and we'll talk about some of those things maybe in the next slides. And then these are just our funding areas. And each of the funding areas, you all are familiar with these, but each of them have just slightly different criteria. And over time, as we've gone application to application, we learn different things. And so you'll see different funding areas have just different expectations, different limitations on the funding. And I'll talk some more about that in a few slides here. All right. And so again, just the eligibility, you folks should be familiar with this, but our community grants are restricted to nonprofit organizations. Organizations can ultimately apply, though, if they're applying with a fiscal sponsor. The projects generally that have those physical improvements have to be within the city of Portland boundaries. And then, but for workforce, there's a broader overlay, given that the workforce moves around and workforce in the broader metropolitan statistical area do contribute and work on our projects. So that's where we have a wider boundary for projects investing in workforce development and contract development. And then again, for the 2026 round, our total grant award expectation is about 60 million. And so again, we're expecting open applications on the 25th here. They'll close on about roughly 60 days later, on the 27th of May. We'll go through scoring selection with ultimately awards announcements later this fall. So this is sort of the cycle that we hope to rinse, repeat. And this is the cycle we've been on. And I think there's been, and I'll get to some of the next slides and talk about some of just the trade-offs, dynamics, discussion points that we expect to play out as we circle back and step back here. And then I think this is a repeat, so I think I'm going to keep this going forward. So what I want to just capture here is over time, from where Meg, Robin, you both started, each round we've brought more clarifications, brought additions. And I think this is going to be an area where we step back and say, how is this working? And so this is just a sample of some of the updates that we've made over time, updates that in some instances bring greater clarity, let folks know what they can apply for. In some instances, require folks to put more effort into the application. And so these are just some of the things that I'm going to acknowledge and name. One, we moved from our original application platform, which I forget what it was. I think we had designed it ourselves, to a web grants, which is something that we use. I expect in the coming years, actually over the next couple of years, we're probably going to move into a more purpose-built solution that's designed more and tailored for our applications. But web grants is what we use currently. And I'm sure those that have reviewed applications with us may have comments and thoughts on that. Now I'll leave it there. We've refined over time ineligible activities and eligible activities. Each round we get different ideas and we're like, ooh, we should have actually probably said that's ineligible. And that's just learning. And part of that is giving more clarity outright. So some of the things we've done is we've said, hey, you absolutely can do initial maintenance expenses. You can prepay maintenance contracts on your solar panels so that if you're installing solar panels, you can get those inverters replaced at 15 years in. So we've done those sorts of things where we've been more explicit that you can include maintenance expenses and initial maintenance contracts into your projects. That's an example. Where places where we've been explicit is, nope, you can't work on for-profit commercially owned buildings. And part of that is really distinguishing. We've got a strategic program that our Prosper Portland administers called the Building Energy Efficiency Grant Program that's targeted on that. But also it's just because nonprofits are the primary applicants, this program was never intended to be just a pass-through. So those areas where we've clarified that. And then other clarifications we've said is you standalone climate resiliency measures that increase energy use without greenhouse gas emissions reductions are not eligible. So those are some of the kind of things that we've clarified over time. Things that we've added on. We've required quality assurance process participation. So if you're doing an energy efficiency project, you have to agree to do quality assurance and let our independently contracted entities do quality assurance on your projects. So that's a clear expectation when someone comes in that's going to happen on the projects. We've increased our allowable time for planning grants from 1 to 2 years. Instead of having just a singular funding cap for all of the funding areas, originally our first round, I think when we opened it, we said funding cap was 10 million per across the funding areas. We've very much adjusted that. Part of that is as we work through the CI Climate Investment Plan, different funding areas have different essentially different total resources, and so we've managed the funding caps to accommodate different projects while also making sure we could support a variety of projects. So our largest funding caps play out in our transportation decarbonization and our energy efficiency renewable energy space. And our smallest funding cap is probably in our, I believe it's probably in our green infrastructure space. We've added limits to the number of applications. And so originally, organizations could apply for any number. We did not put any limit on that. And that just posed challenges from our review perspective, where we would have some 400 some odd applications. In some instances, organizations applying for 6, 7 grants. And there was a lot of discussion, deliberation internal with the team around, if they got awarded all these grants, do they actually have the capacity to implement all of these? And it's a lot of review time to engage all those. It added more back and forth to really try to understand, is this the project they actually want to do, or is this just in? So we've added limits on the number of applications and asking folks, put your best foot forward, double down on the applications that make the most sense to you. So you can put in one implementation grant and one planning grant in a given funding area, or an implementation grant in different funding areas, but you can't apply for multiple implementation grants in a given funding area. We've piloted funding for general operating expenses for organizations whose primary purpose is regenerative agriculture. We heard loud and clear that whereas maybe in the transportation decarbonization space, you can install plenty of EV charging stations. You can distribute different numbers of electric bikes. Or in the workforce development space, you can train many different individuals. There's quantity of units you can keep doing. Whereas in the regenerative ag space, a lot of the feedback was the work is about maintaining this existing asset, this existing space, and making sure and preserving a plot of land so that it continues producing locally grown food in a way that builds the soil integrity and sequesters carbon. So it's about maintaining. So try to really figure out, how do we support that in a way that acknowledges that difference in that space. And then across the board, and I gave an example up top, we've really added in some more scope limitations in order to essentially minimize the duplication of strategic programs across the program. And so what I mean here is, a perfect example is we've got our energy friendly homes program, which is just launching now. And that program is intended to retrofit 3,100 homes over the next several years. And we want to make sure that we've got this program putting a lot of energy into. We want to minimize market confusion. And so how do we differentiate between this program we have here and yet also still enable community groups to do single family home retrofits in a way that's tailored, that addresses and innovates in a way that serves communities? So that's been a place where we've tried to balance that in a way that isn't too heavy-handed, but also acknowledges that we just spent a lot of energy into creating these programs. Let's make sure we're not duplicating that exactly one for one on our community grant side. But those are going to be some of the questions we tease out in the next round, is what does that evolution look like as we move forward further? And so I think what I'm just going to name here, and we've got question slide, one more slide out, is just looking ahead and as part of the next CIT development. These are some of the things we're going to be focusing on. Program design. What's the solicitation cadence? How many community grant cycles, and what's the timing? There's been a lot of desire and feedback and wanting more interaction and back and forth with staff in our grant process. Folks are saying, we want to explain more of our grant cycles. We want to explain more of our projects to you all. Right now, when we open up a cycle, we open it, and then it generally is about 8 to 9 months between open to close. And so to add more time in there, I think the discussion point is going to be, do we move to an every other year grant solicitation? What are the trade-offs there in terms of opportunities, how frequent those opportunities present themselves? But those are some of the conversations we'll have in terms of, do we want to shift that? Those are some of the cadence and the timing. Application size and complexity. We designed an application that was really a one size in many ways fits all type of application. There's different forms for different funding areas where we get more detailed information. But in some instances, that sometimes creates confusion as we try to structure questions that are relevant for all the different funding areas. And that was really designed on the premise that we wanted organizations to be able to really tap the entirety of what PCEF could offer. That was the premise of an organization coming in and not just doing a energy efficiency project, but also weaving in and planting trees on the site and bringing in a community garden on the plot or doing some trans. So we really wanted those more holistic projects, but I think those are going to be some of the trade-offs we discuss is do we start to break them apart? And so that's really and then application size and complexity. Some of that is really, do we start to think about different funding amounts and what does that mean? Program differentiation is going to come up a lot as we talk about the next time an investment plan. We've been building up capacity within the community. We've got these strategic programs, and how do we make sure again that we are leaning into the strength of community innovation community brings in serving our communities, but also how do we lean into making sure that we're able to implement programs efficiently, minimizing market confusion. So that tension we'll have to really walk through and tease out across our programs. And then really working through, now we've been 5 years, we've grown capacity, we've invested in new organizations, we've brought organizations into the space that haven't been in the space, that have had deep connections to community, but maybe haven't done climate work. And so as we get here, I think this question of what is the balance of creating that space for new organizations to come in versus making sure we're also supporting our existing organizations, since there's still, as we grow, the resources are limited, and we need to think about that for many reasons, not just because of resources, but also, how many pre-apprenticeship organizations do we need? How many organizations do we need training on regenerative ag practices or on or folks to become HVAC technicians? Are we, in balancing that? And some of that is going to play out really as we tease out these investments. And so last, I'll just say, will be really when we get into the investment areas, there'll be similar different types of questions that are really diving in. What's the balance, and how do we want to think about community benefits associated with commercial buildings versus single unit or multi-unit housing? Some of them it seems obvious, but I think that tension is certainly rising. I mentioned just a little bit, but workforce development alignment with the regional labor needs. We've been surfacing that a lot more and really trying to hone that in so that we're not overtraining folks in spaces where the needs don't exist or the jobs don't exist. Aligning that demand and supply in the regenerative ag space. And then for transportation decarbonization, which was a new funding area in the most explicit sense with our climate investment plan, we're learning a lot. Community partners are coming into the space, and yet in that space, government partners are key, given a lot of what we're talking about is regional infrastructure, whether we're talking about our partners like TriMet, Bureau of Transportation, Metro in some instances. And so it's really starting to parse out and understand what's the role of government partners. And I think those are some of the areas we'll probably be diving deeper into as we think about that moving forward. So I think these are just some initial reflection questions I wanted to put out there to get you all thinking and sharing some initial ideas. I don't have an expectation that you have answers to these today. I think it's really about getting these in front of you all. If there are any thoughts, ideas, because this will be coming back, and like I said, it won't be me coming back to you all. It'll be someone much smarter than they bringing these to you all and engaging you all on this. But we'll just be like, which of these areas questions feel important to you as you hear them? And that wasn't exhaustive, but just wanted to hear some of that. What do you see as some of the trade-offs or tensions in the next CIP? What are additional questions you want staff to explore as we think about community grants particularly? And I think this is really community grants, but it'll weave into the others. And then what points, in the process do you want to engage? And last, just stakeholders, examples, data you'd like us to bring back in the future into these discussions.
We have about 7 or 8 minutes for this section. So Robin, kick us off pretty please.
Yeah, Sam, you kind of brought me, at least me, probably Megan too, down memory lane. So we were contemplating all this, and these are great discussion topics. And I think early in the early PCEF years, we had some in-person kind of long kind of conversations. Long, not bad. It's just good conversations around this. And I think this is definitely one of those areas I think that warrants that. Trying to have those conversations over Zoom and whatnot is just not. These are complicated questions and issues. They're worth very robust conversations, and so I just hope that we have the space to have those conversations.
Thank you, Robin. You would like to see those conversations in person? Is that what you're saying?
Well, Yeah, I guess. I know that's not convenient to everybody. And let's just say I don't want them to happen over Zoom.
Yeah, I think that's heard, Robin. I think there is a lot of value. I mean, for what it's worth, we enjoy. I mean, it was a production, but we enjoyed going to Junkie Delta Center, going over to the Urco building up off of Gleason. I mean, we were touring every part of the city. We were in Milagro space. We were in every other space in those early development. And so I think, well, this will be something we can bring back to the team and surface and see what it'll take.
And I wasn't necessarily meaning the committee meetings, right? But we've had over the years some kind of in-person, more like retreats, and it's just a solid time where we could have conversations, and frank conversations. These meetings are always structured, and sometimes it's a little bit difficult to have the conversations to adequately address some of the topics that you raised.
Thank you, Robin. Other questions, comments? Excitement?
Yeah, I'll share, Dr. Moses.
Okay.
Oh, Sam, thank you so much. It's a lot of information to take in. It's really exciting to know that we have this next community grant round opening up at the end of this month. I am really curious, and it's best, served for a separate discussion, but really interested in the grant categories that seem to be performing really well. And maybe they don't nicely break out that way, or, seeing the grant categories that are underperforming. I would love to better understand that if we have some data that can be shared with us, just for us to understand that.
I think we'll be excited to bring that. And I think some of it is going to be, we'll have to figure out how we describe what that means, right? I think what I can at just face value say is that we probably have some of our greatest competition for resources and great project ideas and demand in the energy efficiency space, renewable energy space. And part of that is just, I think, a legacy of work that's happened in that space. And so I think there are going to be real questions around the value proposition of different project types and really giving us an opportunity to dive further into that. And that's why I signaled that we're getting a lot more asks to fund commercial building spaces. And there's a certain benefit to those in terms of these more community-centered spaces, but then how does that compare or to investing in multifamily? And it's not necessarily an either or, but what's the balance and what do we want to look for there? So I think we'll get that. Whereas a polar other example is, I think there's a lot of work to do in the transportation decarbonization space. I think and what I mean by that, there's plenty of investment ideas within the region, no shortage of investment opportunities, certainly when you think about our regional partners. But when we think about our community groups really leaning into the space, really just continuing to build that knowledge base up across the community around those ideas, whether it's electric bikes, electric cars, charging stations, and all the range of opportunities to lean into that and help folks move around in ways that are lower carbon, is going to be a space that we'll tease out more. But that's so we can give you that where the demand has been, where we see still a lot more development opportunities, and then where where we've been surprised. So I think we'll be able to bring that information, certainly.
Yeah, and then just understanding what exactly the bottlenecks are for those other underperforming categories. It's not necessarily is it always capacity, or is it something else that needs to be triaged before it can actually be more successful? So I would love to be able to know that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
maybe if I can, for just the record, just say, I wouldn't say those others were, just for my purposes, Trace, I'm not putting words in your mouth. I wouldn't say they're underperform. What I just relayed at least wasn't underperform, but it's a place where we're seeing difference in demand and capacity showing up, that we will be able to surface and explain sort of what we think is there and what it'll take.
Yeah, in all fairness, that was me saying it. You did not say that. So I certainly don't want that to reflect on those grantees that received money in those categories. So my apologies, but there certainly some, as you pointed out, has had a long runway to be perhaps more more throughput. I don't know the best possible way to say that, but,
Yeah.
than other grant categories. So.
Yeah. We'll talk about where we gone slow, where folks have gone slow, where they've gone real fast, all that. We'll bring that for sure.
Thank you so much. Andre and then Meg.
Yes, thank you so much. I am really excited about the future of transportation decarbonization. And what I would really like is to better understand and for our committee to better understand what's really happening out there, not just at the community-based organization level, but also at the governmental level, so that we can really start to map out, like maybe start to build relationships between those. So yeah, I'm just really excited about it, but I would love if there's some way in the future to really just start to map that universe, so we can start to fill the gaps and build those bridges.
Beautiful.
I'll say D'Angelo, sorry, Andre. I'll say I'm excited to bring that because I think this is an area where we're seeing those collaborations, those partnerships, and sometimes we're like, ooh, we see you government entities making its way in, and yet there's probably a way in which we can say, how do we want to surface that? Because those are real needs that are surfacing on the community side that in many instances only our public entities can actually deliver on. And so how do we really lift that up? So yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Meg and then D'Angelo, you're going to wrap us up on this section.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. It's pretty cool to think we've been 5 years doing this now, and there's just so much lessons learned from you all. It's great to surface these, and it'll be great to dive in. So thank you. And like Robin said, I think there's a lot to chew on. So just my quick, as the regenerative ag green infrastructure person, caught my eye. I would love to hear a little bit more, not tonight, but down in the future, about that whole operating expense question. And then also that seems to be an area where the different applications, and I just want to hear a little bit more about how you imagine the different applications. That seems like a lot to manage, but then also maybe does tailor the review a little bit. So just the different applications, does that mean for the different funding areas? And then when that you have this question of tension and trade-offs, and you surfaced it, we have these city-led programs that may complement or replace community-based ideas, and I just kind of exploring that a little bit more, if there are possible synergies among them or like where that is. And I'm thinking about, we've shifted a lot of the tree planting over to city bureau-led versus organizational-led, and can organizations be subcontractors? Is there value in doing that? I would just love to hear more about kind of that experience, and think about ways we might consider doing that in other program areas. Like, for example, I wonder about regenerative agriculture having a bit more of a coordinated approach as well, but I'd like to explore the trade-offs more. So there's a lot of things there.
Thank you, Meg. And D'Angelo, you're up.
I'm actually going to lower my hand because Meg, you touched on exactly what I wanted to ask about, is like the trade-off between city and community programs and, the synergies between the two. So you said it exactly the way I would have said. I will try to say it. So I'll stop there.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I'll just close this section out with saying it's the right question around that, and I think it's going to be important as we situate and start thinking at the front end, sort of what are going to be your guiding principles, your framework for how you think about the next climate investment plan, and that framing collectively. This has always been about how do we grow community capacity to deliver and serve the community, and yet we can also acknowledge that there are efficiencies and in terms of how we administer programs. So getting into that is the work of it, and I think I appreciate you calling out Equitable Tree Canopy Program with urban forestry is going to be a good one to probably step back and see how that program is working, because that was it was about bringing community into and working with directly the city, and bring that partnership together and leveraging both community groups doing the volunteer plantings as well as our local contracting community doing the plantings. And so I think we'll be able to glean some lessons learned from those.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. Great questions and observations. So Sam, committee recruitment update.
Pass it over to Raphael.
Awesome.
I am Raphael. I will make this short and sweet. We completed the initial evaluation of the PCEF committee applications for the 3 open seats we have available. Based on the review criteria, staff has narrowed the pool of 63 applicants down to 20 recommended applicants to advance to the second phase of the process. So the next steps just include convening the recruitment subcommittee, which will be comprised of Anna, D'Angelo, and Tracy, to review applicant materials and then confirm shortlist. Then we will schedule interviews with that shortlist, which are planned to take place, we hope, before the end of the month, and then finally bring the final recommendations to the whole committee for a vote.
Wonderful. Thank you for the hard work. Fantastic. Anything else, Sam?
Nothing else. I think we wanted to make sure you all are sort of abreast of this conversation because you're going to hear that energy. It starts to pick up on our side as we get into these community grant rounds and solicitations. There's a lot of buzz, and so I want to make sure you all are tracking sort of where we are because we're also we know that there's places we're going to get into it. A lot of what we're going through here is making tweaks. So thank you. I just appreciate everyone spending some time with us this evening, and more to come.
Beautiful. So I would love to adjourn this meeting at 6:58 p.m. and thank everyone for their hard work and your wonderful questions. Thank you so much.